Since I posted this mag converter online, I've had several questions about how to print it, so I'm going to try and address those. This is the feed ramp ejector part. The rest of it is actually down inside the magazine, and it looks like this. So this is what one looks like when you put the pieces of it together. So I'm going to go over how to print it and how to clean it up and get it ready to install. This is what one of the adapters looks like when you take it off the printer. These are support pieces here. The part is printed in this orientation. It's vertical. The guide bar, which is this part, is printed on its side like this. And I usually just print rows. I can print about 15 of these at a time. It takes a little while. The risk to printing multiple ones at a time is if one of them fails, you got to let the rest of them print or scrap the whole thing. These I usually print in pairs. They come off the printer like this. They're basically just right next to each other. Anyway, these are supports that are generated by your print software, and these should break off fairly easily. Now this is PET filament. I went with PET because it's pretty resistant to any cleaning solvents for a firearm. But anyway, so that peels off. There might be a little bit of a little thread left hanging on the end here. You can clean that off with a razor blade. Same thing on this side. Should peel off. The only risk here when you're taking these off is that you'll bend this over really far if you didn't have your support set up right. These are 30% supports, and it's just a back and forth pattern. It just goes back and forth. Anyway, this part here is actually a support that's in the drawing. I did that because the bottom of this part was kind of rough, so I just went ahead and drew a support in there. So this is not something you can turn off and on. You'd have to delete this out of the drawing. When you get ready to take this little part out, I just use my scraper. I use these to clean my print bed. You just kind of wedge it in here along this line right here. Just wedge it in here. The top will tend to stick, but there is some space in it, so it shouldn't really adhere very tight. But that part will snap off like that, and then do the same thing. And if it doesn't snap off, it's no big deal. Really, all you're trying to do is break it loose right up here at the very top. So we'll do this side, and it broke loose pretty easy. And now you can just slide this piece off, and that's trash. The next little bit of support you need to clean out is inside this hole right here, and that's for the guide bar. The guide bar is going to go inside this hole. This is an old part here, so it's not really printed right, but the guide bar will go in this hole, and it should go all the way up into the bottom here. If it doesn't go all the way up, then the guide bar won't go all the way in. It'll be hanging out like that. You don't want that. So to clean out the guide bar socket, I take a small screwdriver. It's just a small flat blade screwdriver, and I just push it in here and lean it that direction, and push it in on this side and lean it this direction, because I don't want to put stress on the outside of this joint. And it tends to break loose pretty quick like that, so it's broke loose now. You can either just kind of pry it out, or I have some small needle nose pliers that I use to pull this little bit of support out of here. Okay, so most of the support's out, but there's a little bit in the bottom, so you want to make sure that's clean, because again, you want this guide bar to go all the way in here. So I'm going to just clean off any edge material here and test fit the guide bar, which should fit in here. It's supposed to fit snug, but not incredibly tight. I mean, you don't want it to fall out, but and you could glue it if you wanted to. But there's a reason I did this in two pieces, which I'll go over in just a minute. See, I didn't go in quite all the way. It's because there's still a little bit of support material left in the bottom of this. So I just take my little screwdriver and just work it back and forth, make sure I broke loose all the support material, and then just kind of flick it out. So that should be pretty good now, and this guide bar should go in all the way, and it does. And when you run your finger over this joint right here, it should be smooth. This part actually has a chamfer, a little chamfer on the bottom, and this part has a little chamfer on the bottom. So when you put this in, this should be smooth, and the reason it has to be smooth is because the follower, the shell follower, will ride on the back of that. There's a contact point right here. I made points of contact because they're small, so there's 2 on each side and 1 in the front. It helps reduce friction, but if there's a burr or something here, when this goes up, it'll hang on it, and we don't want that. So the cartridges are sitting on here and they're being fed up this direction like this as the magazine's emptied, and we don't want it to hang when it gets here, so this joint needs to be good and smooth. Last little bit of support is this right here in the front of this. This is where the locking tab is at. This you can clean out multiple ways. I used to just use a little razor blade and stick in there, but now I pretty much just use my little handy putty knife. Just put it in here, move it over, put it in on the other side, move it over. That pretty much cleans out the bottom. So this is pretty clean now. You could smooth this up if you wanted to, but it's not very important. And then take my screwdriver, put it in the front here, and just break this loose, and it falls out. And there you go, guys. So that's pretty much it. This is just about ready. I would clean up this little bit of thread right here, that little bit of filament that's just stuck on here, so get rid of that. This is pretty smooth. It's not bad. Now it's important that there's not a lot of debris or residual fill or anything on top of these, or underneath these I should say, because these points actually set on the top of the PMAG. So this all goes inside the PMAG, and these 2 points are on the outside, and you don't want a lot of gap between this and the PMAG because it'll hold it up and make this rub on the bolt excessively, and we don't want that because it could cause it to break or just wear it down faster. So just make sure that these little bits of residue of fill are gone off of here. So this one looks pretty good, and it's pretty much ready to install. When you print the guide bar, it's pretty much going to come out just like this. Don't stand it up. Don't lay it on its back. It just won't print very well that way. Lay it on its edge. Either edge, doesn't matter, but one edge or the other. There will be a little bit of support underneath this portion and a little bit of support underneath this portion. Now, I found out later that I don't really need this on here. This could just be cut off right here. So if you feel like modifying the drawing, I don't care. To fit this into a 20 round magazine, you just put this all together and slide this into a 20 round magazine, and then mark with you can use a razor blade if you want, something like this. Just put it in the magazine and mark where the bottom of the magazine is, and then grab a hold of the guide bar. This will stay in the magazine. Just pull the guide bar out. Then about 1/8 of an inch above that mark, cut this off. You can do that for a 10 round. If you got, I don't think Magpul makes a actual 5 round magazine, but they do make a 10 round with a block in it, so that you can only hold 5 rounds in it. You could just trim this bar off however long or short you need to. I'm working on a 40 round guide bar, but it's much longer. But this thing's purpose is, as I said in other videos, the bullet noses will ride on the back of this. It just keeps them from going forward. The front of the spring is on this side of the guide bar. So it turns out I didn't need this. This used to go into a socket in the bottom of the PMAG floor plate. I don't need this on there because this can't go forward because the spring is in front of it. Okay, so you've got your adapter printed, you've got your guide bar printed, and you've got a follower printed. Now, there's a little locking tab on the follower. You don't have to use the locking tab if you break it off or you cut it off. This will all have a bunch of fill in it. There's one section over here where I put my own fill in there. It's in the drawing, but it pretty much just falls off. Just clean up your I'm sorry, I said fills, but I mean supports. Just clean up your supports a little bit, and this part will be ready to go. Stick it on your PMAG, and that little tab is only to keep the follower from falling off the spring when you disassemble the PMAG. So once it's all together, you put it in the magazine, and it sets like this inside the magazine. Follower goes up and down. Bullets can't go forward because they hit the guide bar, and that's pretty much how the whole thing works. These were intended to be injection molded. They were not intended to be you know, 3D printed parts. I did the 3D printing as prototyping, spent a lot of time on it, and it works well. But wanted to make these injection molded. That didn't work out for me, so I decided to just release the drawing and just put it out there for everybody to use. So print these as many as you want. It does work really well with PET. I've had no issues with it. I found it to be actually really reliable, even as a 3D printed part. I guess enjoy it. I'm going to go ahead and go over how to put this into a magazine without, you know, breaking it or damaging it or anything like that. And other than that, if you guys already know how to put them in, then you don't need to watch the rest of the video. Alright, so this is a standard PMag. It's 30 rounder. This is a brand new one. Just going to take the floor plate off of it, and we'll pull out the spring. We're going to leave this part on here. I guess technically that's the floor plate. That's the slam pad. But anyway, so we just take the original PMag follower off. It should come off fairly easy. So that's off. And you can keep this because you can convert this back if you want. And then we just put it on here, which is sometimes a bit of a pain. Depends on how much you trim this. By the way, I should have mentioned probably earlier in the video, sometimes if you print this at 100%, it may, especially in a windowed PMag like this one, it's a little bit tight. So you might, I started printing the followers at 98% instead of 100%, so that it was a little bit loose, but it's still not loose enough that it tilts. You can still put it in there, push down on one edge of the follower, and it doesn't tilt. So probably 98% size on this. Just scale it down 2%. Alright, I got the 9mm follower on there now. So got my empty PMag shell. There's no follower, spring, anything in it. So I'm just going to slide this up in here. And it may go a little bit wonky on you. Just straighten it out. Make sure it's all the way in the back, towards the back edge of the PMag. And just go ahead and push the floor plate in, put the slam pad back on, like that. So, original PMag spring, floor plate, slam pad. Got your 9mm follower in there now. Alright, I've changed camera angle slightly, so hopefully you can see this better. So the follower's in the magazine, and it goes up and down like it's supposed to. Now, it will still tilt some without the other parts in it. See, I'm just pushing on one edge and it does tilt. But it won't do that when we get done. So here's our completed assembly, and it goes in front of the spring. So there's an open space in the spring here. This section of the part is going to go in front, and this guide bar is going to go inside the spring. So inside the spring here. Hopefully you guys can see that. The light's not great in here. This is going in front of the spring. Just push that down. Now, the reason I did this guide bar as a separate piece. I meant to go back over this, but the reason I did this as a separate piece from this is because, one, I can't print all this as one piece. It could be injection molded, but when I talk to the injection molders, I can get, you know, a lot of these molded, but they'd all be molded for 30 round magazines. This guide bar is intended to be, it could be different sizes for 10, 20, 30, and 40 round magazines. And there's also different magazines that this thing will work in besides the PMag, but I don't want to get into that just yet. But anyway, that's why the guide bar is a separate piece. So this goes in front of the spring, and when you put this in, this should go in fairly easy up to this point. There's a locking tab inside here, inside the magazine. There's a little bump in there. When you take your PMag apart, you'll see it. There's a little bump right inside there that the groove on the original follower, it went up inside this groove. Well, this is cut out to miss that little bump. This is designed to engage that little bump, this little part right here. So this should go in fairly easily up to this point. If you printed it and it's too big, it's too wide, it won't fit inside here very easily. It'll spread the magazine apart, and it won't fit in your magwell very well. So this part of the install right here should go in and out fairly easily. I mean, it'll drag a little bit, but we don't want it to fit incredibly tight. So once you get to this point, it's hit the little lock tab that's right inside here, just below the top of the magazine. And then we just push. But don't push down on these back ears because they're made to sit on top of the magazine. That's what supports them. So before they're installed in the magazine, you can't push down on them. Only push on the front part right here to install it. So I'm going to push down on it, and you'll have to push fairly hard, but if you just push and then keep pressure on it, it'll go in. Now, when it's in there, it's not supposed to move. So if you put it in there and it's moving around, that's not good. Pull it back out, and you may have to take the bottom of the mag off, knock this out, and then look at it. If it's moving around when it's trying to strip rounds off of it, it's probably going to jam up, because every time a round goes forward on here, it hits this ramp and then comes forward and rises up, and this ramp goes all the way up to the barrel. So if it's not tight, when a shell tries to come off of here, this is going to move around, and that round could go anywhere. It could go up, down, left, right. So this needs to fit pretty tight. Alright, so now I'm going to test fit it on a gun. I built a whole bunch of carbines. I put cheap little sights on them, just parts to get them together. This is a standard AR-15 upper. I have a Foxtrot mic bolt in it, and I have no idea what barrel this is. I built so many of these, I got all the parts mixed up. I don't remember which is which. But this, when it's empty, should go inside here. You should not have to beat it or hammer it or anything. It should just go in there and click. You might have to lightly bump it like this, but for the most part, it should just go in like that. If it doesn't go in, it's probably because this is up a little bit high. Now this is a Foxtrot mic bolt. I have done this with Palmetto, Primary Arms. I have bought every bolt that I could come across when I was designing this thing to try and make it fit every bolt that I could possibly, well, come across, and it would just work. Because again, these were to be injection molded, and changing the mold after it was made, I was told it was going to be very expensive. So since I've decided not to get them injection molded, you guys are just welcome to 3D print as many of them as you want. But once the mag's installed, pull the charger handle back. The last round bolt hold open should engage, and it should hold your bolt back. If it doesn't, then either your follower's hanging up because there's a burr on it, maybe you forgot to print it at 98% and you printed it at 100, something like that. But for some reason, it's not all the way up at the top. But if the last round bolt hold open's working and the bolt slides forward, you're pretty much there. Something else I want to talk about with the way it works, the mechanics of it. This ejector tab rides in a groove in the bolt, which I'm going to try. I've already kind of covered with the bolt out of the gun, but I'm going to do it with the bolt in the gun, and hopefully you guys can see it. So if you can see the ejector tab, it's hard to get light on there, but you can see the ejector tab. I'm going to let the bolt forward. You see how the ejector tab fills up the groove where the extractor would ride for the bolt. If it's not filling that up, there's a good chance that it's not going to eject shells very well. Probably won't eject them very far. These currently, as I said, eject 10 to 12 feet. But that's what keeps this tab aligned. This ejector tab being in the bolt, in the groove in the bolt, gives it a steel reinforcement basically, so that this can't flex to the side. If it's not filling up that groove, every time it ejects a shell, it will push this over. I don't know if you can see that, but it will push it over a little bit. And it's pretty violent in there when a case goes off. So if it moves this over too many times or too hard one time, it'll crack. And it'll usually crack right in here. And then it'll start peeling this off. And then basically this adapter's broken. If that happens, you have a bolt that I just didn't happen to come across, or a bolt that's slightly different than any of the bolts I tested or worked with, and you probably just need to make that ejector a little bit wider. Figure out which side of it has space and make that side a little bit wider. You'll have to change the drawing, or you're more than welcome to contact me and I'll update the drawing and repost it out there so everybody's pulling from the same drawing. But that's pretty much it. That's how it works. I hope everybody gets some use out of it. I hope it saves you guys some money, maybe gets you to the range a little bit more, but Print these in whatever color you want. I print most of mine in gray because when these are right next to the 5.56 PMags, they're just kind of laying there like this. Sometimes people don't notice which one's which, but it's got a gray top. I know it's 9mm. You can print them in orange, purple, pink, white. I don't care. I will tell you, if you print them in a lighter color, like white, it won't take too long for it to turn black and discolored because gas is going to come out the back of the barrel when the case gets ejected. I have never melted one. I've done several mag dumps. I've warmed the bolts up with propane torches. Now, I mean, you know, if you get them too hot, these will distort because it is a thermoplastic, but you can't get it hot enough with 30 rounds in the magazine. And I know that you can shoot 90 rounds out of it and put the 4th magazine in it and just leave it, and it doesn't distort. So I've tried this multiple ways. This was never intended to be a finished product. It's just printed and sold. That's why I'm just kind of giving it away, because that didn't work out for me. But anyway, I think that's it. I have tried these with Full Metal Jacket round nose, like these. I've tried them with 124 grain flat nose. I've shot it with a lot of hollow points, different things. It seems to work, and it's just a couple plastic parts. So my contribution to the world. Have fun, everybody, and be safe. One other thing I wanted to mention that I kept forgetting about is you lose 1 round for every 10 with this conversion. So when you put this in there, it takes up a little bit of space at the top of the mag, and you don't really lose any space at the bottom, but since it takes up some space at the top of the mag, now you can't get 30 9mm shells in the same PMag frame as you do a 5.56, unless basically all your internal dimensions are the same as 5.56. So, you know, the follower would have to be that thick, and my follower is obviously thicker than that. But anyway, so if you got a 10 round magazine, when you convert it, it'll hold 9. A 20 round, it's going to hold 18, and a 30 round is going to hold 27. So I just wanted to mention that. I kept meaning to, and I kept forgetting. So when I say 30 rounds, I meant we filled the magazine to capacity. So for me, that was 27 rounds. If you got a 20 round, it'll be 18, and if you got a 10 round, it'll be 9.